Deb Rogers' novel, Florida Woman, was published in July 2023 by Hanover Square Press, an imprint of HarperCollins. Called a bewitching debut by Publishers Weekly, Florida Woman was featured as an indie next pick by the American Booksellers Association. Deb has lived and traveled throughout Florida, working as an educator, policymaker, and a victims advocate. And she now lives on the Atlantic side of the state in the very haunted and very beautiful town of St. Augustine. Follow her on Twitter and Instagram at Deb on the Rocks, or learn more about her on her website, debrogersauthor.com. Deb will be joined in conversation with a local poet and podcaster, Kay Huggins. Kay is a creative, the owner of Aphelion Editing and Consulting, and the host of the Raindrop Corner Podcast. As a longtime resident of Jacksonville, Florida, they have sought to support local artistry, foster thought-provoking content, and aid in human rights advocacy. Kay is an English major with a concentration in psychology. For over a decade, their life has been dazzled with project management, technology industries, logistics, editing, writing, and production. Through the intersectionality of Kay's craft, they aim to champion the community by providing a platform to marginalized groups. Currently, Kay is writing their debut novel and enjoying leisure moments with their fur babies. Kay, I leave the rest to you.
Thank you for that awesome intro. I appreciate you. And thank you, everybody, for being here today, both on Zoom and here physically. Deb, I'm super excited to talk to you.
I'm so excited to talk to you.
And I said this when we first kind of joined each other. I'm excited because when I read your book, it is probably one of the best literary experiences that I've had in a while. I was not bored at any point during reading your book. And what I really like about you, like outside of just the novel, is how you center other people's experiences and also how you evoke that in your storytelling. So
I like it here already. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So talk to me a little bit about talk to me about your relationship with storytelling and kind of how that has bled into you creating this story.
That's a really great question. And I know being at a library, this is the heart of my universe, and I'm sure yours too. I'm so grateful to be here where we all come and bring our sweet storytelling hearts and gather with other like-minded people, whether they're other writers or readers, or most of us are a little bit of both. I think I come to storytelling like a lot of people do as a reader, finding that my true comfort and my sense of self came to me mostly in isolation through books, through the stories of others, to the place where that is how I think about myself, that is how I think about the world, that's how I work through ideas and concepts, and story is really everything to me. And the chance to sculpt that into one solid narrative took me quite a while to come to in my life for a lot of reasons. That takes time and resources and a number of things. But this story just begged me to tell it because I believe it wove a bunch of different sections of myself and my life and Florida and my future into one spot, and it just took on a life of its own. So I think those are some of the reasons that story captures me. It's how I teach myself who I am. And I come to a point of, I just love people. I love our craziness. I love our idiosyncratic interactions with each other and ourselves and our environment, and how we're a constantly changing puzzle that we don't even understand, and how much we seek in that. And to me, writing a story is the way in and through, and even the muck of it.
I love that. I love specifically that you kind of referenced it as like you growing with the work, and the work kind of enriching you just as much as your experiences have enriched you. And like, I also found myself inspired in a sense because this is your debut novel.
It is.
And
late blooming debut. But isn't that word funny? Debut? It's like quinceanera or something. But yes, it's my first novel.
I also like it. What I like most about it is there are a lot of pressures that writers and creatives put on themselves to have to put something out as quickly as possible, or to have to go through a certain journey in terms of what that process looks like. And I like how it was like a culmination of things. So one of the biggest questions that I had, and it was a question that I had before I even started, I listened to it on audiobook, but before I even started listening to the book. So the book is called Florida Woman. And I'm like, normally, you know, in news stories, you hear Florida man is normally the normal one that you hear. But like, what specifically made you choose this particular title for this book?
Well, I really did want to explore Florida as a mythic place where we know that Florida is both not as weird as the Northerners think we are, and maybe more so in different ways that they don't even know. So I really wanted to explore that. I know that I love living in Florida. I feel very Floridian, and that has been true of my whole life, even though I wasn't born here. I am at home here. I admire how Florida is a place you can go to recreate yourself, but it's also a place you can get stuck in the quicksand of, and it's a place where we live out loud. I mean, like right now, we don't know if there's a monsoon out there. There might be another one. We don't know. Maybe Zoom will let us know. You know, we're vulnerable to weather and alligators and life that nobody really understands, and also to the vulnerabilities of each other. And we also have this great sunshine law that kind of bites us in the rear because we share our news openly, and then that means that our mugshots become viral content for people who don't quite understand what actually a Waffle House is, or, you know, or why there really would be snakes in your bed. So I don't know, all that really is interesting to me, how both people have a mythic, they think they understand Florida. They'd love to make fun of us. They also love to spend all their money to come here to vacation.
True.
And some of us, you know, especially those of us here in Northern Florida, we're not that. We're neither, you know, so all those things are just really interesting to me. And specifically the myth of a Florida man versus the Florida woman. Like, who is the woman who would go viral for a crime? Does she deserve infamy or not? And then how might we handle those different factors on what's going on in some of the rural areas of Florida, including some of the creative ways that people want to live? And that interests me as well.
It's a really good segue into my next question, which is about the main character, Jamie. Because one of the things that I found really interesting about her is just how nuanced she is. You've got a person that, you know, had a very tumultuous start to her life, and has had to navigate never really feeling like she belonged in environments, having to navigate how to connect to other people and how to adjust, you know, being exposed to things like the prison system and things of that nature. So my question to you is, talk to me about how you started to craft Jamie's character and how much of what you crafted is connected to your own experiences. I just want to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think all characters end up being part of the prism of ourselves. I kind of have a Jungian philosophy about characters in that way. They are and they aren't us. You know, a lot of people have come to me and asked, is that me in your book? You know, I was like, no, but they're pieces of everyone and yourself in every character probably. I'm very, very interested and know in my life there has been a real contradiction between feeling isolated and disconnected from people and craving community and connection. And I think during the pandemic, I felt that, like many of us did, very acutely, knowing what we might be missing in connection, craving community. I'm also, you know, wacky Aquarian enough to often fantasize and in fact try, let's just gather a group of my friends and a goat and we can, you know, live better than this, right? And what would that look like? You know, what would a utopia look like if we could do it? Whether that's a few houses in the suburb or tiny houses in a cul-de-sac or an actual piece of land. So I think that push and pull between, I want deep connection, people are wild and maybe dangerous to me. I crave isolation and creative time alone. I feel punished when I'm in time out of time alone. You know, both those push-pulls are part of many of us. They definitely are part of my life journey. And usually whatever I don't have, I want. If I'm very busy and have a lot of people in my life, I'm like, I need a writer's retreat on an island, no one can find me, and the reverse is true. So those, I think, are both cultural and individual, and also that craving. Well, it would all be better if I just met my tribe, if I just or crafted it. So maybe I'm a secret cult leader. I don't know, but that hunger, wow, if I could just find 5, 6 people, in a garden. But then what happens, and what happens usually goes a bit awry, because people be people. It's it's messy, and I love that too. That's interesting to me too. Is that what your question was?
I think it answers it perfectly. Because, in the society that we live in, and even growing up in school, one of the biggest things, one of the first things your parent says to you when you, go to school, hey, did you make any friends today? When you're coming back from school, there is this push to connect with people. And that's kind of, in many ways, at least in school, a lot of people measure your worth based off of how many friends you had and who you were friends with. And then, nowadays in society, people want to know what you're doing. Are you interesting based off of where you work, off of the vacations that you go on? And I find, it to be very interesting because we'll watch these movies or these TV shows or watch commercials, and, everything will look pretty, and you're always going somewhere. There's a destination in mind. You always are looking towards something that's better. And sometimes better is not actually better, which kind of leads me into my next question, because
but isn't that also that's why we get drawn into people who might not have the best intentions or who want to exploit that hunger. And that is interesting right now too. I think all the research shows us that Florida is a hotbed of cultish type groups. The country is a hotbed. Everything from MLMs to group experiences, or even a workplace can be a little bit culty, because we have that hunger, exactly what you said, we have that hunger for identity and that draw, and what happens if someone gets in there and moves towards it?
Exactly. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think the book was refreshing to me because it was a reminder to just take a step back and say, okay, these are the things that you want, but examine what's around you. Is what you think you want actually what you need? And it was a really nice moment to kind of come back to self. And I'm curious because your book was so interesting because it was not quite thriller suspense, but it was, it was not quite drama, but it was there were these different levels to it, and it felt speculative in nature. So take me through your process, as you were trying to craft what kind of book you wanted to write.
Oh, that's a good question. I think I just wanted to not worry about genre and just talk about people and life and a story. And I read too diversely. I mean, like I said, I love my library. I love my Libby Audible list. I love stories and books. And I didn't want to have to pick. I also wanted a sense of reality, and I wanted a sense of disorientation. So I wanted to try to. I really love that feeling where you're falling a little bit and you're not sure if you're interpreting things correctly. Is that person flirting with me, or are they about to rob me? I don't know. I love that messy. I've said messy too many times, so I guess I like messy. But I love that nebulous quality that we have when we're not sure. And actually, I want to have that more in my life. I think I've made my biggest mistakes when I'm sure, because I'm usually wrong. So I think I felt that way about genre too, about writing. So I started both with place and with characters. And then when I started letting them interact with each other, it turned out they all had agendas that were against each other, and played that out. And so sometimes that does maybe have the quality of a twist. There are a number of twists or reveals, but that's because that's how life to me works. You think you know somebody, and then you find out you don't, or you don't know what they were up to or what they had in mind. And I think that's rewarding to a reader in a story, and I think it's revelatory. But then sometimes you just want to get to know a character and hang out with them, and find out what what kind of plant they like to grow in their garden. So
I love that, because I think that like a lot of times I edit outside of here, and sometimes I book coach, and it's always fun like coaching someone through writing the book, because they have these very specific ideas as they start writing the book as to what it's supposed to be like. And I'm like, no, everybody's process is completely different. And I'll normally challenge them by saying, okay, so you have all these characters. Like, what happens if you just put them all in a room together? What happens? And then, like, we kind of go from there, and they'll be like, well, this person doesn't like this person, or this person feels this way. And it's really nice to see story just kind of viscerally craft itself very organically.
And I think that's why I wanted it set at one particular place and sort of have that be the bottle for, in this case, a wildlife refuge in the woods where Jamie ends up doing her community service. So she lives there. She has to meet everything new. So she has that disorienting feeling. There's definitely things going on there that are reveals to her. So I think I wanted that to unfold amongst all these people, and you kind of have that sense of, well, what's happening in the other rooms that we're not in right now, so like even that can even be in a house. So this conversation happening in this room, but who's in the kitchen doing what? I think we can learn a lot, and that's fun. And I think in far as writing, when I first drafted, that felt like it was there, but not in the text. So I added an element where we peek behind the scenes in the functionality of this group, and we read some of their Google Docs as they try to craft a website, wherein, as an editor, I'm sure you're familiar with this, you learn that they don't really know what they're talking about, and they're not on the same page at all. So by adding that in, I had a lot of fun with what do we say to each other when we're trying. I mean, have you been ever in a group project and it's just, unless you take the reins, it is not going to come together. Because nobody really knows what they're doing. So that added a lot of fun too.
It sounds like it was a lot of fun. So do you have like a favorite scene or a favorite moment in the book that like really touched you or was really fun to write? It's like picking a favorite. I've loved writing about the monkeys. I mean, I really loved the monkeys. In fact, that's where my editor was like, I know it's really great you have a name for every monkey, but the readers don't need to know the name of every, all 54 monkeys. So she really helped me with that, and I'm exaggerating, but I really did enjoy writing the monkeys. I enjoy the action scenes. I mean, it is really fun to get to. Did you have color forms? Am I dating myself too much here? It is real, or the Barbie movie just came out. So, I mean, it is really fun to move characters around. And so those of you who are writers know that. It's pretty dang fun to write the action scenes as well. Action is fun. Action scares me, though, because, like, it's the one part of writing where I feel like I have to be, like, I don't know. It's like how I feel about math. I'm good at math, but because I have to really apply myself, if that makes sense. Well, and I'm definitely an out-of-seat behavior student. So I love actually taking field trips and going to where, outside and saying, okay, this person, if they were here, they couldn't see this or that. So it's also a great excuse to get out from my desk. So definitely did a lot of that. I like that. I like that you were able to like go on adventures through the story that you were telling. And like, I find the setting of the story to be so interesting. Let's talk about Atlas for a second. And also, like, so as you were crafting Atlas and what was going to happen at this place, like, what kind of thoughts did you have in mind? What kind of place did you want this to be initially as you were crafting the story? So Atlas is the refuge, the acreage in Central Florida that's the owner is trying to not sell to developers and not sell to Disney, but if people have held land for a long time, they might not have cash, and they really their choice is sort of cut off limbs to generate cash or figure out some way to make land that really isn't good for much
in this case, the fern-growing land in Central Florida, that it's really not like you can decide I'm going to have a massive cabbage crop here, or so I just love the idea of what would scrappy people who maybe weren't that firm on the law decide to do with this land, and how would they recreate themselves and sell themselves on that. So I think creating Atlas specifically as a wildlife refuge is also a way. I've just been obsessed with. I've been obsessed with the wild monkeys of Florida forever. The story of someone releasing macaques accidentally as a tour. You guys all know the story where in Central Florida, a tourist operator thought, let's help the Northerners really enjoy the tropics by populating our island with the glass-bottom boats with monkeys, and he completely forgot they could swim, and they escaped, and some of their troops living in the Ocala National Forest, and they might be moving around. I've seen them when I lived in the Ocala National Forest area. I saw them and been fascinated. How is that possible that they're thriving and not thriving? And we have a problem in Florida. It's not just monkeys. We have a problem where we are amazingly hospitable to everything from the wildlife trade to exotics to to things like Burmese pythons, and we have a lot of ethical decisions to make about all that. We could have neighbors living with exotics next door to us, and with the way the zoning law is, some of the actual refuges that exist are next to residential areas, and those animals can make friends. So all those things are just interesting to me, and they're very particular to Florida and some other places, but really particular to Florida because it's so temperate here for so many animals. And we're not as comfortable with handling the problem of wildlife monkeys where they don't belong as we are with snakes. We don't, they've had that problem in South Florida where nobody feels really great about trapping and exterminating monkeys, right? So what do you do when monkeys who might have disease, they're just so much cuter than rats. So all those things just really interest me. And I love the people who step up to do good work, but if you don't do that with funding and with ethics and with oversight, and if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you can have disaster.
I like that you bring that up because that's a piece that a lot of people miss. I'm from South Florida, and being so close to the Everglades, it's very common because there's a bunch of ports down there for people to bring exotic animals in, not know how to take care of them, and then just unleash them. It's right. Awkward when you're walking into your bathroom to wash your hands from dinner, and there's an African tarantula that rolls from underneath your sink, and you're like, oh, you're the size of a saucer, and you're in my house. Those are just weird things that sometimes can happen here. And it got me thinking too, more than just Atlas, but so this is a refuge. This is a place that's supposed to be a sanctuary. And to revert back to Jamie, the main character, she's someone who's coming out of the prison system to essentially volunteer, if you will. And she's kind of bewildered because this is an environment where she's like, oh, this is actually kind of nice, coming from a prison. And there's almost these rose-colored glasses of what this experience is going to be once she gets there. And in many ways, both of us have a background in victims advocacy. And Jamie, very much so throughout the story, is someone that feels as if she's trapped in a cycle of abuse. And I want to ask you specifically about that. How did you draw off your own personal experiences? And what was it that you wanted to convey through Jamie in that particular situation?
Yeah, the character Jamie has been in foster care because her parents took off, and has had some really bad luck in the people front, but even more than that, financial bad luck or lack of privilege. And that's definitely part of my story. I think it's really hard to recreate yourself or just to grab those bootstraps if you just never catch a break. If you, for whatever reason, have family that have drained you, or just have had bad luck, or have had, in Florida, can have disasters happen to us. That's true in many places, but every place. But I think it's really common in Florida that we see people who are transient or trying to start over because they've really lost a lot, including people, but also just either their health or their well-being or money. We see a lot of that out loud here. So that really, if you don't have people to take you up and lift you, and if you crash from compassion fatigue or just have hit 1 mile too many and you crash, it's really hard to once again start over, even though we're in the state where that's what we offer others, is a place to start over. So I think a lot of those things do come from my life, whether that's as a single parent or burnout. Definitely have burnt out in nonprofit service. Hit those brick walls where you're like, well, I've got no choice, but I don't know how to start again. And so I would draw from that for her character, or for that sense of, God, can I just catch a break? And so that's what happens when she hits this place. She thinks, oh, I caught a break. Because on the surface, at first glance, it does feel like that gathering of like-minded cool people at a cool place doing really great work that one would hope for.
I really appreciated that. And I think, like, as I was reading it, for context, everyone, I work in crisis. I work for the National 988 suicide hotline. And as I'm talking to people on the phone, specifically individuals that are going through a cycle of abuse, like, you see that. And a lot of times for people who are ambivalent about their situation, they're in what we call, well, not even ambivalent, maybe they are not quite aware of their situation, but they're aware that something is wrong. They're in what we call the pre-contemplative stage, where they are not at the place where they want to change their situation, because there are things that they see about their situation that are still good, that are still fruitful, that are still worth being in that particular situation. And there's a bunch of other emotions and fears and things associated with that. That is just a generalization for the sake of time, because I don't want to give a dissertation. But what I really liked about the book is we got to see, like, Jamie's change journey from being a person who was very used to, kind of always being in a little bit of an acute crisis state to a degree. She was someone who struggled when she was younger, got in trouble, tried to rehabilitate and acclimate back into society, and was having trouble with that and ended up back into the system. And just getting to see that journey of trusting herself, which seemed to be something that she struggled greatly with earlier in the story, was very empowering. So I want to ask you, like, when you reflect on writing this book, on just everything that went into it, talk to me about what you learned about yourself through creating this work.
Well, I learned one thing that I can definitely recommend to anyone who's trying to finish a creative work or challenge themselves to do something new. I learned I could finish it. So that was a big thing to learn in and of itself. And I wish I had known that would be so rewarding earlier. I think I've started and stopped a lot of things, afraid to finish them. So I did learn by going through my character's journey that it's really good to see things on through to the end. I think I learned that I am really interested in when can I trust people. I didn't set out to write a book. It's mostly about trust and trusting yourself, but that's part of what emerged in Jamie was if you're not sure if you can trust the input of other people, if you don't have that person you can go to whose advice is rock solid or who can give you good guidance, and you have to develop that yourself, you're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way until you develop that internal compass. And so I think I did learn that about myself, that I have I have needed to develop that, and it doesn't matter how long it took me to develop it. It was my life cycle.
I think that's such a beautiful thing to just actualize, and also like put in tangible form for other people to like take stock in it, because it can be hard to trust yourself when you're navigating everyday life and you think you know this thing, or you think you can do this thing, and life happens and it changes and shifts your journey, and you're now having to relearn what your actual truth is. And it was just really cool to see that vivified in a story.
And that was a fun experience. The other thing I really learned is I like people a lot when they're bad. I like, and so maybe it's okay to embrace that side of ourselves, or for me to embrace that side of myself. You know, there's a lot of interest in really knowing what you want and going for it, even if it's not about pleasing someone else. It's kind of fun to write the characters who are just have agendas and are willing to exact that agenda on other people. And I don't know that that's been me, but it's kind of fun. I'm kind of interested in it. Like, can there be more agency that we all find within ourselves? And maybe if that's the kind of character we root for or find ourselves writing, that might be something to play with.
I like that a lot, because so I've been doing a lot of shadow work, and I'm going to explain what that is for people who might not know what that is. So shadow work, I don't want to botch the scientist's name, so I'm not going to say it just in case it's the wrong scientist. But basically, shadow work is where you are embracing those elements of yourself that are messy and not necessarily as pretty, and don't fall into what society would call the box, that perfect box of, you know, you're supposed to do the right thing all the time, you're supposed to have all of the answers. It is looking at the different elements of you that are hard for you to face. And those could be the things of like maybe having feelings of vindictiveness if somebody makes you feel some type of way. Maybe when your insecurities come out, you project your anger, and they're the things that you oftentimes don't want to show to yourself and you don't admit to yourself. So they come out in other ways. That's what shadow work is. And I really enjoy dark characters because you're getting to see their shadow out in the open. You're getting to see the pieces of them that normally possibly you would hide because you don't want to be arrested, or, you know, anything along those lines. Or just thought of in a negative way. We all, I think it's very common for people to say, don't worry about what people think of you. The reality is most people care about what people think of them. That's just the human way. So I really enjoyed that aspect about your story. So with that...
yeah, own your inner Florida woman. Own your inner Florida man.
Exactly.
I'm a Florida dirtbag, so what?
With that in mind, so as you were writing the story, and you're writing about a character that is essentially a little bit darker in nature. You know, she's done some things that she's not very proud of and that a lot of people publicly are judging her for. Did you have to face any shadow parts of yourself as you were writing that character?
Yeah, sure. This is getting really deep. Yeah, sure. I'm not going to confess anything, although I'm waiting to see who will confess, because so far at every book group that I've talked with, someone confesses something nefarious to me, and I will keep it secret. I'm trying to figure out who it is. Yeah, of course. And you know what I love about character work is no one thinks of themselves as a villain. Well, most people don't think of themselves as villain. They completely can justify that point of view. They completely often see themselves as heroic in it, or as completely required, or the only one willing to do it, or whatever it is. There's lots of... So thinking that through has helped me embrace, I think, those parts of myself that I might have been that I was bad already. I just was in denial about it. Or in other people, you know, and sort of make friends with that shadow, or that shadow in other people, and not only see people in one slot or another. I think that's always a good human process to do.
That's the part right there, the bit where you said you make friends with your shadow. Because in shadow work, that is where like the crux of it is supposed to be. You start to embrace those shadow parts and you're like, okay, this part is a part of me. How do I take that element and incorporate it into my natural day-to-day in a way that is healthy? So I love that. I think that's awesome. And that was one of my favorite things about reading your book. I got to see like a true arc of a character because I'm an editor and a writer and a nerd who likes story and analyzing stuff. I really value when a story gives you a character that is very nuanced and very complex, because Jamie is super complex, and oftentimes we talked about trust earlier, doesn't trust herself a lot and doesn't know how to appropriately question things because she hasn't really had a lot of balance to really kind of come back to center. So would you say that this book was healing for you through writing it and just the writing process?
Yeah, definitely. I think most writing is in some way healing in that way, and able to put a narrative on loose amalgamation of perspectives and characters and story. And I mean, I love fairy tales. I love how a fairy tale can sort of, whether you know it or not, take you on kind of that sort of transference of whatever the need is to the acquisition, coming out to an outcome and being able to see if that's better or worse. Is there a moral there that I need to learn for my next, or have I reached a new plane where I can do better and understand myself better? So definitely was healing for me in a couple of ways, including that burnout that I've talked about, like what it means and what it means to, want to try again. Because I think that's ultimately the story that, or the arc that character sees. Well, she can rise again, and this is how she's going to do it.
I like that a lot. Try again. That's what we do, right? Every day. It's like a series of try agains, and like
hope you don't hit the paper this time.
Exactly. But no, I think that is amazing, and I think we're getting close to the point where we ask audience questions.
And you have clipboards and maybe Zoom. Do they get to ask questions too? Good. I'm happy for any questions.
I know, right? This was such a fun conversation. Just like being able to talk with you and learn about your process.
Such great questions.
Yeah.
I'm going to think about this for a while. I think she's going to collect your questions.
No worries. No worries. I'm going to announce how the question part works. So it does take a little while. So everybody here in person does have clipboards with little note cards and pens to write down your questions. Our Zoom audience, if you'd like to send in a question, do so in the little Q&A box right next to the chat box. And we do have a volunteer who will go around and collect it. So just hold on to it and we will get it from you. We do have an early bird, so I will hand that off first, and then we'll go ahead.
Clipboards are great. You look so official. You guys look like you're assessing us,
right?
Or something.
Like, there are times where I haven't known.
Am I going to get a diagnosis from this Greek choir? I don't know.
There are seriously times where I've walked into environments and I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a clipboard and I felt important
come on
in that moment.
Change everything.
Okay, so the first question is, was there a particular experience or conclusion that you were hoping readers would get from your novel? That's a good question.
Well, if you're from Florida, I definitely hope you feel validated for being a Florida woman or Florida man. I definitely hope you feel seen and loved, and just what I said earlier, that it's okay if we're here to recreate ourselves, or it's okay if we're here and living out loud in our flip-flops and drama, and it's okay if we're if they don't understand us and they're joking about us. So I think my answer might be different to non-Floridians, poor things. What was the question again? What I hope that the outcome was?
So it was there a particular experience or conclusion that you were hoping readers would get from your novel?
Yeah, I mean, I hope people felt feel less alone, whether that's through the characters or through, so the character does bond with the animals there and finds that, that's a way to have connection as well, and a way to have friendship with herself and with others and community. And so I hope maybe people feel invigorated to figure out what that is for themselves. Is that okay? Does that make sense?
I think it makes perfect sense.
Does that make sense? Whoever asked that? Nobody's going to confess a crime? Oh, okay.
Not today. Maybe later. There's still time. There's other questions.
And then the Dateline guy comes in. All is set up.
The next question is, I was interested in the brother showing up. Could you talk about that?
So that's a plot point spoiler. I'll try to speak to it with, but also avoid it. So I'm very interested in estrangement. That comes from a very personal point of view. I come from a family with layers of estrangement that are very political and complicated and would require a long time. Like if we bring a new person into the family, it takes a long time to explain why we don't mention so-and-so's name, but so-and-so's back in the fold. We're just sick with it. So I'm really, really always been interested in what would heal that, what makes some people very vulnerable to it. And I think Florida is a state specifically of a lot of estrangements. Sometimes we meet people who've retired here and they don't talk about it, but the reason is it's better for them not to be in Pennsylvania because the family in Pennsylvania is not the best place for them to be. For whatever reason, but the people in Pennsylvania might have a whole different story about why Brenda's moved to Florida. So I think Florida in particular is home to a lot of second chancers, and I also worked with runaways in Daytona Beach for a while, and at-risk people who are homeless for different reasons. So I just know that Florida is a destination for estrangement as well. And then the foster care system perpetuates estrangement, and how that creates a longing for reunion, but also might not have a supportive, I don't know if any of us know how to support each other in reunion, and sometimes we're afraid to do that because it might not be safe. So all those things are very, very interesting to me, and I think Jamie's hunger for a relationship with her brother and maybe not being able to even assess all that means is key to her character. Does that make sense? Without too many spoilers?
I think I like that you bring that point up, because I think with Florida as a whole, we talk about Florida woman or Florida man, but most of the people who live in Florida aren't actually from here, which is an interesting thought, when you think about it, and just when you think about people coming here for a specific reason or being estranged in the literal sense, from a familiar point of view.
And having to recreate traditions or experiences or community because of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If anyone's name is Brenda, I didn't mean that. It was just or from Pennsylvania. It was just an example.
The next question that I have here is, your tale of telling your story to yourself, describes my experience when reading it. I think it was more of a statement of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, of the individual resonating with you telling the story to yourself and them seeing themselves in it, it sounds like. For the people on Zoom, the audience member, she was saying that she didn't know what was going to happen next. I also agree. I also did not know what was going to happen next, which is the hallmark of a good story. The next question is, what is your top three advice to someone who wants to write a book loosely based on their life?
Move away from your family. That's a great question. It's a real primal question, because our stories are ours, and we should have the freedom to write them respectfully of other people's other stories, and our families are, important to honor that. There's definitely been issues within those themes in my own experience as a writer, so I don't know if I'm the best person to give advice. But I know to have complete integrity with your story first. I think that's important. I don't think you need to share that with other people until you are ready to do so. because it's really not going to be about them. Even if you wrote an exact memoir of your experiences with them, it's not about them. It's about your story and your memoir, and you have to feel free to do that. And definitely if there's fiction or other elements of storytelling or any other remove that's the second tip is there a way that you can make that safe for everybody? Is there a way that you can pull back the lens a little and add other characters perhaps? Is there a way you can collapse people so it's not as identifiable as someone? Or if it does need to be reportage, is there a way that you can remove just one step so that it doesn't feel like something that should be a personal letter to them? If it all feels like it should be, then that's what you should write. But if it's truly a story that you want because it has meaning for you to write and you believe it is going to have meaning for readers to read, then you just have to go and finish that and feel whole and good about it. So I think those would be my tips.
I'm really glad on that last one that you made that distinction, because I think, so when I edit, a lot of times I end up editing memoirs and stuff like that, or just stories that are based on people's personal experience. I mean, as writers, most of your stories, if not all of them, are going to be based on your own experiences to some degree. But I think it is important to know like why you're writing it and what you want to do with that writing, what that writing is supposed to convey for you specifically.
And like I said, people will also take totally different things away from it. I mean, one example is I thought of Jamie has a mother who I said left her. And a writing friend said, what do you think about your mother reading the book? Are you concerned about that? And I mentioned what it might be like, what's true and what's not true about Jamie's experience to my experience. And she said, no, I don't mean that mother. I mean the mother that the people wanted to kill. Like, I hadn't even thought about that character as a mother my mother might read and say, well, wow, everyone wanted to kill this woman. You know, so it's like, it's very, very different. And then when my mother's experience was very different from either of those two worries. So you really have to figure out how to get support to see that readers are going to read totally different than what your fears are, even if you put a character that is perfectly aligned with their experiences. It's just the nature of the beast. And the last would be find a community of writers, because really only other oddballs, like other writers, can get that, what's hard about that and what's supportive about that, and make sure that you're supported in your agency in writing your story, whatever that might be.
That's so important. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were like, writers sometimes have this very romanticized idea about what writing is going to be like when they write the book or they write the story. And they were like, writing is actually a very lonely process, and it helps to have community. So the next question is, what is the main challenge with living in this part of Florida? Oh my gosh, what a question. I love that.
I think being misunderstood, but maybe that's just me in life. I don't think people get us, and it bugs me. And then I've added to it by putting out a book called Florida Woman. I don't know, but I just think people think we're something that we're not, and we are the fulcrum of so many thoughts. Don't you hate that graphic that people put on Twitter where Bugs Bunny is cutting us off the map? It hurts my feelings.
It's
rude. And, and it's like, but then when you're in Florida, you might have a lot of critiques of Florida. And we define so much for this world. We define culture, we define entertainment, we define politics, but then we're given so little respect. So I think, but then I don't want people to understand us too. Like, I like it that we're a piece of our own. So that's a contradiction. But that and the heat. The humidity.
I feel a similar way. Heat is my top one. The next question is, what do you suggest to writers who want to avoid getting emotionally drained from writing emotional characters and scenes? That's a really good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm with you. Whoever wrote that, I'm with you. Just feel it. Go ahead and go through it. Feel it, because it's helping you. Just trust me, it's helping you somehow. So if you can, do what you can do to bear it and feel it and truly be there, and you're going to get good art on the page, or you're at least going to get progress that you can throw away or something. Like, bear with it, finish it. It is so rewarding to have a whole. So bear with it, get the support you need to be able to finish whatever that work is, whether it's short or long. Those are some things. Take field trips. I really, really believe a lot of work is done in the car or away from your place of work. So wherever that is, like, take breaks, get grounded, and especially if it's possible to get to an environment that's similar to what you're writing about, because your senses will replenish yourself. And then the last tip is use Florida, because for how many frustrations I have with Florida, we are so lucky. Like, if you're here, you're what, an hour from the beach, or the Central Florida is magical. I promise you, the Fountain of Youth is in there. They lied about where it is to keep people from it. Florida will restore you, and we're so freaking lucky. And it's not where any of those people know it is. So if you haven't found those places for yourself, definitely find them if you're doing the hard work of emotional writing. It's a writer's paradise, and that's why everyone came here when they could bear it, and when refrigeration allowed them and mosquito control allowed them. St. Augustine has Zora Neale Hurston's home, and Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, and all kinds of all the writers from the 20s came down here in the winter, and before that, people traveling through here did tons of creative work, and that's because I believe Florida is magical. So let where you are charge you up and sustain you.
I like that. I like that a lot. It is important to reset yourself. And
if you can. Yeah. I know that's easier said than done.
So the next question. So that's sweet. Somebody put a little note on there. I'm gonna read the little note first. They said, "Thank you both for your hard and good work." I appreciate you, whoever wrote this question. There's 2 questions here, actually.
That's probably the criminal.
So the first question says, "When reading Florida Woman, I felt as though Atlas was its own character." Me too. Okay. What locations in Florida most inspired the wilderness of Atlas?
Can't reveal all my secrets to you, but you guys are precious and special to me, so I'll tell you. No, well, I think you probably would know it if you've in that area. Do you know where Palatka and Crescent City and DeLand head on down towards Disney, but you don't go that far? And if you veer to the right, you hit the Ocala National Forest. That is amazing space. That land is magical and full of wonder and full of bizarre people living out loud in little enclaves doing wild stuff. So that's the sweet spot, especially where the forest butts up against the counties. So all that area I love. I love Gainesville, Alachua, and Putnam counties. All of that stuff around there geographically is the land that I would go to, and that's where I first saw the monkeys and got obsessed with them in the wild on the waterways near in the Ocala National Forest. Our national forests and springs, I mean, come on, we are so lucky. And those are amazing, amazing places to go and replenish yourself, I think. That's a secret, though. Don't tell the Disney people, right? I mean, unless you're on Zoom, that's smart of you, but don't tell anyone else.
The next question is, I really felt like the characters' names fit their personalities. How did
Even the monkeys?
Yeah. How did you how did you name them? Specifically, sorry, I'm slightly dyslexic. Specifically Tierra and Dagmar. And
Dagmar.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I love naming. I mean, that's there are not too many tasks of writing that are fun, but naming is definitely one of them. And it's a place where you can play with symbols and names. In particular, I feel like the people who create intentional community often are intentional about their names. So that was fun to me. And then, like I said, I did name the monkeys because I felt like that is part of what we do in having both children and pets, is project our desires and a sense of self onto things through names or through the fun of language with names. I also wanted some of the names to have double plays, and some people have two names, like Jamie's brother. And to me, that was part of that recreation. Sometimes we have a given name, and then I love nicknames, and I love when characters are called different things by different people, because I'm a Debbie, Deborah, Deb to different people, and it can kind of prism shift a little bit in those relationships. So maybe that's just because I grew up as a Debbie.
I like that, because if people are being called by different names, it kind of shows you what kind of relationship these varying characters have with that person.
Yeah. It can convey intimacy. It can also be I never said you could call me Debbie. It's we all have that too, or some of us.
The next question is, what inspired you to publish your book, and what process did you take to get it published?
Well, like I said, I'm a late bloomer with absolutely no connections. So I really didn't think that I could be published by one of the big 5 publishers. And I had intended to self-publish, which I think is a wonderful way to share your work, and was pursuing that path. But was fortunate enough in that process of preparing the book, I finally got to a place where I thought it was ready. It was not ready. I'm so glad I didn't publish it. It had, like I said, it had way too many monkey names in it. But I was fortunate enough to see an agent on Twitter that really interested me, just because she was interested in something about Florida that I didn't. I was just going to talk to her anyway, and I'm like, oh, she's a literary agent. Maybe I should try. I think I should have tried harder before that. I think I just had a sense that I'm not in an MFA program. I'm too old. I'm just a person in Florida. I'm not in the system. So I wish that I had tried sooner. But I'm glad that I did when I did. So the process I did was I reached out to this agent and I said, hey, cool tweet. By the way, if you want to, basically, bad advice, but it worked. Are you interested? And she said, I'll take a look at it. And then she helped me do a revision. They call that an agent can do a developmental revision with you. Helped me prepare it to go out, and then she shopped it to the publishers. And I think the thing, my saving grace is all along, I'm like, well, how fun is this? I get to be declined by big publishers. I just tried to enjoy every step of the way, because I really didn't think I would be fortunate enough. It's such a terrible publishing industry. Is hard. And so I feel super, super fortunate. And then I got the absolute perfect editor. She's from North Carolina. She gets it. She got the characters, and she really helped me take it another step with more editing. So I was absolutely not ready when I thought I was ready, and I'm glad for that. The more, even regardless of how you publish with whom, whether that any size publisher or on your own, it probably needs another revision. Still does. So that's just nature of the beast.
And I co-sign that too. As an editor, yes, you need revisions,
It's
even
so
if an editor
hard.
is
it's
not.
so hard to
doing
look
them.
at it again, but gotta.